Hello, and welcome to the second episode of Analyzing Fathers. The purpose of this podcast is to break down and look at fathers, both good and bad, and see what, if anything, we as fathers can learn from them. As promised, today's episode will be diving back into the classic cartoon King of the Hill and discussing the parenting of Hank Hill himself. I want to go on record saying that Hank Hill is my favorite dad on TV, and I think he's the funniest dad on TV as well. It's not because he's actively trying to be funny, but that he's dead-ass serious that makes him so hilarious. Anyway, on to the video. Hank Rutherford Hill was born April 15th, 1960 in the ladies' room at Yankee Stadium in New York City, something both he and his father are seemingly ashamed of. Hank attended Tom Landry Middle School and then Arlen High, seemingly having the same three friends throughout his entire life: Bill Dauterive, Jeff Boomhauer, and Dale Gribble. Like many American youth, Hank dreamed of playing professional sports for a living and dedicated himself to football while in high school. Although he was a star player, Hank, like many, didn't accomplish that dream, as after taking his team to state, Hank suffered a serious injury, ending his dream. Hank himself believed the injury was God punishing him for doing a celebratory touchdown dance earlier in the game, a belief that likely held an effect on Hank throughout his life, as he rarely does much excited celebration in the series. Despite this, Hank is still very proud of his short football career, often bringing up his still unbroken rushing record as Arlen High's running back. Hank's constant referral to his high school glory days could be seen as a lack of accomplishment in his life, but I think that is subjective, as Hank is shown to be quite happy with his life. In his own words, he, quote, loves the same old, same old. After graduating high school, Hank attempted to join the Army in 1971 with Bill, but was ultimately rejected because of his narrow urethra, a condition Hank is thoroughly ashamed of and shares with his half-brother Junichiro. Hank worked at a store called Arlen Jeans West and as a tractor salesman before settling in at Strickland Propane. At 18 years old, Hank married the love of his life, Peggy. Hank smoked cigarettes for an unspecified length of time, but kicked the habit when Peggy was pregnant with Bobby, only relapsing twice in his life due to stress and when he caught his own son smoking. Hank could be said to be the definition of a traditional American. He is well-meaning, hard-working, loyal, honest to a fault, accepting, and is willing to give second chances after mistakes. Hank is known for doing jobs as perfect as possible, often leading to everyone around him seeking him out for tasks considered dull or useless. However, while Hank is often willing to help in most situations, he usually prefers to keep himself emotionally distant and struggles with expressing his emotions. One of the first episodes of the series deals with Hank's trouble simply telling his son Bobby that he loves him. Hank is also shown to have the same difficulty when expressing his love to Peggy, often deferring to simply saying, "you know," to which Peggy responds enthusiastically as this is even a lot for him. This emotional wall is likely a result of his harsh upbringing under his father, Cotton Hill. As discussed in episode 1, Hank's father, Cotton, was a taskmaster and rough in his treatment of Hank as a child, to say the least. It's also likely that due to his upbringing, Hank grew up to be uptight and won't cut loose as freely as those around him. Hank can be described as a stick in the mud. In one episode, it's revealed that Boomhauer and Dale have been secretly going on fishing trips without Hank and Bill. Hank assumes it's because Bill is an annoying slob, but it's later discovered that they're avoiding Hank because he can be a buzzkill. Hank can be controlling, short-tempered, stubborn, emotionally distant, quick to judge, naive, and rather gullible. For example, Hank believed he was receiving a special deal from the local used car salesman, when in fact he was paying sticker price for 2 decades. Although emotionally distant, Hank considers his wife Peggy to be his best friend and even tells his son that on one occasion. Hank is very conservative and old-fashioned, feeling that physical punishment of children is wrong, another result of his upbringing under Cotton Hill most likely. Hank is shown to believe that everyone shares his sense of right and wrong, often being shocked when others do not do what he expects of them. He is ignorant of new trends and viewpoints due to being deeply set in his ways. He usually responds to new things that he doesn't understand with hostility and disdain, whether he fully grasps them or not. Despite this, Hank can be acceptable when required, though often only as a last resort when no other options are left to him. He is also not above finding not so straight-laced ways of handling situations. such as having Bobby behave negatively towards a couple whose son was harassing him, but the parents did nothing about it. On another occasion, forcing a man that was harassing his niece Luann to be assaulted by a dolphin that had done the same to Hank before. Although Hank seems to have trouble expressing emotion, he is shown to be quite happy upon meeting his elder brother Junichiro, and is very receptive of his brother, even jokingly imagining the two of them getting into shenanigans together, with onlookers saying, "There go those Hill brothers." His childhood likely didn't lead to many opportunities for fun in his home, and perhaps he imagined having a brother or sibling in general might have abated that, or at least split his father's mistreatment amongst them. This, of course, is conjecture on my part. Hank is passionate about his family, propane and propane accessories, woodworking, sports, except soccer, his guitar, construction of any kind, his lawn, and most of all, beer. He spends a great deal of time in the alley behind his home drinking Alamo beer with his friends, where they will talk about one thing or another before giving yips or mm-hms to show their agreement. While Hank knows and admits his father mistreated him and often mistreats his family, Hank still tries to earn his father's approval and gratitude throughout the series. Despite this, Hank has openly disapproved of Cotton's treatment of women, his sleeping around, and his negative influence on Bobby. Hank's tense relationship with his father is likely the cause of many of Hank's life issues, but also likely the reason he is the way he is with his own son, Bobby. Hank hopes that Bobby will become an athlete as well as take up the business of selling propane and propane accessories, once remarking that if Bobby did well at an internship at Strickland Propane, he would have his life figured out by 14 years old. Hank is shown to have a hard time accepting many of Bobby's choices and his free spirit and somewhat adventurous nature, which is in stark contrast to Hank's reserved and rigid ways. Hank's biggest struggle with Bobby is trying to get him to become a mature, responsible, and hard-working person. Bobby, more often than not, tries to find shortcuts, and Hank usually has to clean up the mess that ensues. Hank will often remark, quote, "That boy ain't right," after his son does something strange or that he disagrees with. Despite this, Hank knows his son is a good kid who will do what's right when necessary, and he truly loves his son and is willing to become physically violent in defense of the boy. So what can we learn from Hank Hill as fathers? Firstly, we can learn from his refusal to do to his son what Cotton did to him. Oftentimes we will hear of someone growing up in a cruel environment and then going on to abuse their children later in life. Hank, however, seemed to use his rearing as a tome of what not to do in the case of Bobby. Hank did not let his past completely ruin or control his future in that way, a powerful stance that takes great mental strength and personal awareness. Secondly, we can learn to be more open with our acceptance of our children's desires, even if they go against our wishes for them. Hank was reluctant to give much of Bobby's likes a chance if it went against his own traditional conservative views, especially when Hank doesn't understand it. As fathers, our understanding of what they like isn't as important as our understanding that they like it. As long as it isn't a negative thing, we should do our best to encourage them to explore and find themselves and their loves in this world. Thirdly, new ways to discipline our children, as the ways we received are likely outdated by social standing. One episode saw Hank punish Bobby by having him smoke a whole carton of cigarettes when Bobby was caught smoking. This, of course, led to Bobby being addicted to cigarettes. Lastly, to show interest in our children's likes and hobbies, even if they aren't what we find to be entertaining. Hank only showed interest in Bobby's extracurriculars if it was something Hank was into himself. This most certainly isn't a good thing. Interest in our children should not be conditional or only in what we see value in. If it is positive and your child has an interest in it, then we should nurture it and try to find some interest as well, even if it's only passing or surface level interest. The kind of support from a father could push a child to new heights of confidence and accomplishment. Hank may not be a perfect father, but he strove to be the best one he could, and that alone is commendable in itself and something we can all attempt to mimic. Thank you for watching the second episode of Analyzing Fathers. Please like and subscribe for more uplifting fatherhood content and to be notified of future episode releases. The next episode will finish off our time with King of the Hill and be analyzing the parenting of Dale Gribble.